Dave, if you were going to an actual monster party, let's say like Universal Monster Party, uh,
Oh,
who would you rather be hosted by? Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, or the Wolfman?
wow. Let's see here. This is a tough one.
It's a tough one. I mean, they're all hits. They're all megastars.
Yeah, I think I go Wolf. I think I go Wolfman.
That's interesting.
Did you see What We Do in the Shadows?
I did see What We Do in the Shadows.
I just think that the werewolves were
Okay,
they were
so you picked a vampire movie to talk about how awesome the werewolves are. That's yeah.
they seemed like cool guys to hang out with.
I feel like the Wolfman would have the best party. Like it'd probably be the most fun party. They're party animals technically, so stay away from like the dips because they're just full of hair. Welcome to the First Picture Show, an ongoing series where we discuss horror and thrillers from all of your favorite streaming platforms and anything else we damn well please. I'm high school guidance counselor Jason Monet. I'm here with critic extraordinaire David Joseph. Hi, Dave. How's it going this week?
It's going well. How you doing?
I'm okay. It's 2018 and already we're off to a bad start. It's 2019 and I'm trying to square myself with the new year and all the resolutions. And
What's that drinking, by the way?
what's that?
Some
Drinking? Yeah,
strong
no, I
stuff.
don't do dry January. That ship sailed a while ago. I'm more realistic about resolutions.
Sure.
I gotta upgrade the whiskey this year. So,
Yeah.
let's get into it. Monster Party.
Okay.
Parties. Some people love them. Some people hate them. Some people cater them. And those people are occasionally trapped in a nightmarish hell where they must fight for survival by any means necessary. Monster Party follows a trio of larcenous teens as they work for a mysterious group of struggling, self-described addicts who take a stab at making new friends and bonding with old ones during their group's annual celebration of recovery on one glorious Malibu night. But the party only really gets started when the guests' true natures come out to play. Dave, what did you think?
I mean, I'm not saying this movie's good. I'm just saying I loved it.
Oh wow, that is a strong out of the gate impression from you. That might be your best initial reaction.
Yeah, I mean, this one left an impression, and I'm so happy that I get to speak kindly of a Chris Von Hoffman movie after we were a little rough on Drifter.
Yeah, I mean, it should be said that Chris Von Hoffman has become, in some ways, a mascot for this show, in the sense that I think we bring him up almost every episode, or at least we have since the second episode, since we reviewed his movie Drifter. So it's nice to have, even though this is only our sixth episode, to have a nice redemption arc for Chris Von Hoffman with this movie. Yeah, I agree. This is this was definitely a marked step forward for him. I think it was a movie that had some issues, and we can go back and forth into that. But overall, this is definitely a big leap from Drifter.
I think that the big criticism that we both had on Drifter, at least one of them, was that it was paced poorly, and this movie is paced, I think, perfectly. It never really drags, but it doesn't seem rushed either. So it's pretty perfect in that regard.
Yeah, I have to say the tension was ratcheted up in this one in a much more satisfiable way than Drifter. I think with Drifter, you kind of already knew what the premise was going to be anyway, just based on the very basic facts of the movie, it being an apocalypse movie and it being like survival. And this one, it doesn't mind taking its time, sort of letting the plot itself sort of unfold, because you're not quite sure exactly where it's going to go. I mean, it has more of a satisfying sort of conclusion, I think, and sort of a satisfying like reveal as things happen, because this definitely fits into a subgenre of horror, the home invasion story. I mean, there's certainly a lot of similar ideas going on here. And we can talk about that, because I think, if anything, some of the criticism I've seen of it is that it doesn't necessarily ring as original as it could. I don't know, Dave, if you've read anything about it since we've seen this, or
I haven't done that.
I think it's when people talk about how this movie isn't the most original idea, they mostly compare it to a movie called Don't Breathe, which I think came out in 2016, which was
Yeah,
a very similar idea in the sense that it was about a break-in and about these people that are, theoretically going to pull off a heist, but then get trapped into this environment where they are the ones being kind of hunted ultimately.
I definitely think there's some influences, but it's I think I think it stands on its own. I don't think you know, I don't watch specific scenes and think, oh, that's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is kind of what I was doing in
Sure.
Drifter.
Although there is a crossover here. I mean, there is definitely the idea of a dinner party at the central, heart of this movie. I think the overall lesson is don't ever go to a dinner party with Chris Von Hoffman. I mean, it's probably not going to end well. To your point, in Drifter, the dinner scene is very much a direct connection to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it seemed like it was almost homaging it. In this one, it's obviously not like that at all, but there is that sort of similar bottle episode element to it. I mean, I think that it didn't quite work that well for Drifter. I think it works much better in this version. I think that Chris Van Hoffman is much more comfortable now, maybe working in this space and with a limited sort of schedule and resource. And it's worth noting that this movie again had a very short timeline. It was shot in 17 days. So again, working with whatever you can get together. I think.
Yeah, I get the idea, and I should have looked it up, but I get the idea that he had some more money to play with this time around.
Certainly seems that way, and it seems like it was well spent. Although, I do have some more things to talk about when we get back to that subject. But what did you think of the basic premise of this movie? The idea of serial killers basically getting together for a dinner party. Uh,
Yeah, I liked the idea of treating the murder as kind of a sort of like a cultish AA kind of thing, where basically you had a bunch of people, giving testimonials about, how they're addicts and they're in recovery.
Like all of you, I'm an addict.
Hello, Monsieur.
It's been a long and arduous battle for me. With monsters, inside and out. But here I am, a functioning member of society.
And what, just watch it devolve into just absolute chaos. I'm guessing that premise has been done in other movies. The idea of kind of killing as an addiction, but I can't think of one. It seemed kind of like a more original idea to me. I'm sure it's probably out there.
I thought that was really interesting as well. And I think one of the more interesting points about this movie is that you're never really entirely sure whether or not they are there because they are celebrating what they like to do, or if they're actually actively trying to avoid doing it. I mean, I think that's part of the central tension initially, as the movie sort of reels into the second act, that you're not entirely sure whether or not these people are really trying to avoid, murder, or if they are getting excited to do it again.
Yeah, I feel like there's a spectrum, and the different characters kind of fall in different parts of the spectrum. I think the movies that it kind of reminded me of a bit. If I can see if I can remember them off the top of my head, definitely Don't Breathe. And I think Last House on the Left was another one that it was because it's that home invasion kind of
Yep.
thing.
Yep.
And the premise is sort of like The Purge, and there's a line where he said I needed to let it out. So that was kind of like that. But again, I didn't think that the movie was. I think it stands on its own, and it's pretty original. And I think that if anyone ever starts watching this show, we'll probably get someone to tell me that no, there's this movie, that movie, and big long list of movies that I'm not thinking of. But
I know. Whatever. We don't care. Okay.
the only movies that count are the ones that I've seen.
Yeah, exactly. Everything else I haven't seen is just pure crap. It doesn't even matter.
Right, exactly.
It's interesting you bring up The Purge, though, because I think that this movie also brought other textures to the subgenre of horror, kind of like The Purge did, especially in a political way. I mean, I do think that, the movie starts off by setting up this sort of red herring of a plot about these three wayward teenagers who are trying to make it, their life work in modern times, I guess, and they are basically small big criminals, and they're just trying to struggle to make it happen, and they decide to pull off this heist on a much more upper crust family and their mansion. And everybody that's in the mansion, everybody that comes to the dinner party is definitely, upper crust in some sense. They all seem like they're doing pretty well. You know, they all seem like they're relatively rich and well off. So it does feel like there is this sense in this movie that is talking about the struggle of people that are lower down on like a socioeconomic totem pole against these rich and aloof killers. So, you know, from that point of view, was this movie about class warfare on a very literal level, you know? And if it was, does that make this movie as much a satire as it does a horror movie, for instance? Almost like The Purge was.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting, and I think that there's something to that. You
Maybe.
particularly if you take into account you know, the kid who's trying to come up with the money to rescue his father. I mean, that really hits home. Is like, his father. You know, I'm sure he's not like an addicted killer, but he's also kind of on the wrong side of the law, probably doing, into gambling and things like that. So you have the sort of like the privileged class of criminals, and then
Mhm.
the underclass of criminals. You know, particularly the kids, the main characters in the film. They're criminals as well. They're thieves. So I think I think that's an interesting idea. The idea of kind of a class warfare kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we're misdirected in the beginning to think it really will be kind of a Robin Hood-y almost heist movie in a way, and I think that they tried to give all the three teenage characters some sort of backstory to at least give them an empathetic grounding for why we wanted to identify with them. You know, Casper, as you said, he's trying to save his father, who's in debt to a loan shark. The other two, Iris and Miles, are sort of a Bonnie and Clyde-esque young couple that are starting out and just trying to make it work. And I think that helps, it helps establish them as not being the most terrible people in the world. But having said that, I mean, were there any clear good guys in this movie? I mean, who was this movie really? Who were we supposed to really ultimately root for in this movie?
Well, that's kind of the beauty of it, I guess. Casper, and
Well,
Iris.
I mean, it's interesting. I think, I think the idea is that we're rooting for Casper, but there's also a transformation that happens with Casper, so
There
that by
sure
the end of the
is.
movie, it's not really clear that you want to necessarily root for Casper anymore. I mean, of course we do because it's the end of the movie's great. Like he's freaking badass. But
Oh, yeah, and let's set up the end of the movie. You know, basically, it does what, and I hate to keep bringing it up, but what Drifter didn't do is you get to see because in Drifter the brothers are going out there to avenge their father. Uh, in this one, he's trying to get his father, to save his father, but we get to see that happen, and he goes in there and he busts some skulls and gets that done. But I think your point is interesting also about how maybe he isn't such a good guy because I'm pretty sure the place where he's rescuing his father, they have his father held in this strip club, and I'm pretty sure he kills a woman in the.
well, I think he kills multiple strippers. I mean, I think that final scene is about his realization that he's actually more interested in he's got a taste for blood, and now he actually kind of enjoys it, and he's sort of furthering on the addiction in a way. I know it's his. This movie is his realization and his sort of versioning as a serial killer, or maybe just a killer in general. And it's sort of like you see how he escapes the cycle of abuse from the mansion, but then he becomes this thing. He becomes what he escaped. I thought that was great. I thought that was a really great way to end it. I mean, it wasn't like such a clean ending. It was sort of a nice like, oh, now we're seeing Casper's transformation as part of this evil that he just spent the last couple hours fighting. It just kind of was a nice twist on how it worked out. Going back to what we were talking about earlier about who's really the good guy in this, for much of the movie, you really honestly believe that these people are setting up some sort of murder party, like they're going to basically sacrifice people or something. And then it kind of takes a turn, and you sort of are left wondering if they honestly were, or at least half of them were trying to change their habits, and are now just trying to salvage a situation to sort of continue on the path of redemption in a way. The question of morality is raised more so by them than it is by the people that they are hunting. It's raised more so by Robin Tunney's character, who's Roxanne, the mother of the matriarch of the family in general, who honestly seems like she's trying to save both herself and her children in a way from this kind of lifestyle.
Is she the only person that doesn't really do anything horrible? I'm trying to think.
Well, she does murder at the end.
Oh yeah, but to save somebody though.
Well, I mean, then that's a complicated moral dilemma.
Yeah. No, she doesn't though. You think she did.
She didn't?
He pops out of the pool at the end, and the daughter,
Alexis, played by Erin Moriarty.
Yeah, Alexis ends up killing him.
I should have rewatched the ending. All right, well, that's fair. I mean, so they all have kind of a hand in this.
Yeah, you're right, though. She does stab him.
What did we think about the performances in general? I mean, Casper, who's played by Sam Strike, who has not necessarily been in a lot of big stuff. Otherwise, he was on the long-time British soap opera EastEnders for a while, but other than that, I don't think there's a lot of really big-name things he's been in. I thought he was pretty solid overall.
I thought he was great, and I think it's particularly what sticks in my head, and it may just be because it's the most recent thing that I've seen is the end when he's standing there and his dad's just like looking at him. I think it speaks to what you were just talking about. It's just like, what has this guy become?
I thought that it was good to pick an actor who seemed to be able to carry that weariness. I think of having the criminal background, but not necessarily be a recognizable actor in general, sort of an unknown guy. So it really made him be able to own the role. I thought the supporting cast of his teenage friends, who are Virginia Gardner as Iris and Brandon Michael Hall as Miles, I think that they worked. You wanted to root for them. Even though everybody there was sort of nefarious, you wanted to see them succeed as they were starting their new life together. Virginia Gardner has been in Runaways. Brandon Michael Hall is actually in God Frenemy, which is a show on NBC right now. So, it's nice to see there are people here that have been in lots of things that are recognizable, and there are people here that are starting to come up a little bit.
I gotta shout out to my old the show that I just loved. It's the one that Lance Reddick was in.
Oh, well, he's been in lots of really good things. The Wire? Is that what you're thinking of?
Fringe.
Oh, Fringe. You're thinking Fringe. Okay, yeah.
And you're right, The Wire. The Wire and Fringe are two, like, those are Hall of Fame TV shows right there.
And lately he's been in the John Wick series. He's also been in Rick and Morty a little bit. Like, I mean, he's still doing lots of cool stuff.
He is, and he's so good in this.
So let's talk about Lance Reddick for a bit. I mean, I think that he probably doesn't get talked about as much in this because there are a lot of people in this movie, and I want to talk about that later. But, he had a really important role to play, and it was kind of fun watching him be both incredibly in control and incredibly forceful, and then also lose his shit.
Yeah, he definitely does.
Yeah.
But he delivers some of the coolest lines, man. I don't want to spoil any of them, and really the ones that I'm thinking of are ones that I probably wouldn't repeat on the internet anyway. But he's great. And he just brings a kind of a cool intensity to the role. I loved his performance.
Yeah, I did too, and I like the fact that, again, that you were kind of kept guessing as to where exactly he fit on the scale of evil to good. As you become more clear that he's controlling this, and it seems like maybe he is actively trying to do something to help everyone.
Well, no, because it starts off and you think, oh, this guy's super evil because he's kind of got this girl with him that against her will. You don't really
it's not really clear. Right.
Yeah, you don't get any story about her, but she clearly is not happy with being there. I don't know if maybe she's a killer that doesn't want to quit killing, or maybe you don't get that vibe though. Like it's not
entirely clear. What did you think about the rest of the performances there? We had Julian McMahon playing Patrick Dawson, the father figure, who is known for things like Nip Tuck. And he was in Fantastic Four movies.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was actually also in a series on right now called Runaways, which also happens to star Virginia Gardner, who played Iris, the caterer.
I thought he was great. I thought, he does a good job of kind of tipping you off that he's not necessarily reformed.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
it wasn't as over the top as the two other guys.
So there's a trio of younger ones. There's Elliot, and then there's his friends Cameron and Jeremy, who are played by Chester Rushing and Jamie Ward, respectively. And they are the ones that kind of go a little more nuts by the end of the movie.
And they're pretty over the top. Like I mean, they do a great job of making you hate them even before
Sure, they're
they
really,
do
really annoying.
the
Yeah,
evil stuff. Like,
yeah.
um,
Chester Rushing, who's the actor who plays Cameron, who's the character that has the chainsaw, for instance. I feel bad for the guy because I think the other thing he's really known for is being in Stranger Things as one of the side bullies uh, from the popular kids. And I'm like, this guy, he's just built to play a bully. He's just built to play like an annoying character that you hate to look at.
he looks kind of like the bully in Christmas Story.
Yeah, there's a similar Farkas thing going on there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's got to be the freckles.
I guess.
Yeah,
I guess that's what it is.
You heard it here first. David hates
What?
freckles.
He's riding that. Maybe he's getting pigeonholed into this part, but he's riding it all the way to the bank, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, going back to Julian McMahon's performance for a minute, I agree. I think that the way that he reserved himself is where he really helped to build the tension in terms of not really knowing what exactly was going on in this movie. It's clear that something is happening that's upsetting them all. I think that Rappatori's performance has a lot of different subtleties to it, but she clearly is troubled by everything that's going on, whereas Julian McMahon's father figure of Patrick is at once tense and sort of ready to snap and to bite you. I thought that was a really nice touch to it. And then so that leaves their children, Elliot and Alexis, played by Kian Lawley and Aaron Moriarty, respectively. Aaron ends up being sort of the sympathetic foil for the one to help victims, and that's in direct opposition to her brother's character Elliot in this movie, who ends up being like the most sadistic and the most murderous ultimately.
Yeah. You're leading me to a question, something I wanted to ask you about, get your opinion on. There are some things in the middle that maybe, I don't know, it could be, you could characterize it as being less satisfying, or you could characterize it as kind of setting up some mystery. I'm unclear as to whether or not she is also an addict, or is she adopted?
Yeah. I also wondered that.
Casper asks her, like, why don't you just leave? Because she's like, I'm trying to get out too. And he's like, and she just says, well, it's complicated. I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I like the mystery around the other girl. I think that's kind of leaves a lot. But this one, it almost just felt like a plot hole that they just tried to turn into some kind of mystery.
Yeah. I think there are some things that are definitely missing in this movie. And I think in a lot of ways it has to do with how ambitious the script was. I think that, Chris Von Hoffman decided to try to cram in a lot of different characters. And because of that, their backstories suffer. You don't necessarily get a well-rounded vision of everyone. There are definitely people in this that are really thrown away. I mean, certainly the guest, Ali, who's played by Diego Boneta, who's the guy with the guitar.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he has one memorable scene actually, which is his sort of speech at the dinner, which is great. But he just appears kind of randomly, and then he is dispatched with very easily and sort of thrown away. And to me, it was like this is because maybe there are too many characters, and he doesn't, the director or the writer doesn't really know what to do with everything satisfactorily. To me, it felt like if he had maybe not stretched the characters so thin, or stretched with so many different characters to begin with, he could have maybe spent more time actually kind of maybe explaining more of the backstory to some of these things as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like, and I'm doing it again with Drifter, but Drifter was this kind of enormous, epic kind of film that he seems very committed to having a quick movie, to not having a long runtime. And then in this film, obviously, it's a small setting, but it's a huge cast, and for him to keep the movie clipping along in as short as I guess he wanted to make it, he definitely had to be pretty judicious with screen time. And you're right, Ollie seems like he gets
It was just he was killed a little bit too easily. I think it just seemed like he
really.
was kind of taken care of because Hoffman didn't really know what to do with him.
So yeah, I mean, I think and it's just one thing I definitely I picked up on that. The second time I saw this, I was like, I don't know if that line really works. So I wanted to
Yeah, I
get
mean, it's funny. I guess the thing I was expecting them to reveal at some point was that she was maybe like a tiny, like a baby or something of one of the victims that they had originally murdered, in their spree, and so they adopted her into the family. And they sort of made it out to be like she was the one that was so different. But at the same time, we also find out towards the end that she maybe isn't that different, and we also find out that she really does honestly care for the characters, especially when she sees, Patrick, her father figure,
hmm
kind of disemboweled in front of her. So it walked a line. It really wasn't clear exactly where she fit. That didn't necessarily bother me so much, but I do chalk that up to being like just another thing where the character didn't have enough time to really get, to have herself fully explained in the background. Do you feel like the character of Elliot was a little bit too over the top? Do you feel like it was appropriate? Do you feel like it was too
I
easy?
I wouldn't say too easy. I think it's maybe easier than any of the other parts because he just kind of gets to be, just. Oh, I mean, his two friends were pretty much straight evil also.
True.
Um, but I mean, he does a great job with it, and the part where he's clapping with the hand,
Yeah, that was
uh,
pretty messed up.
that was pretty well done. I thought that was just it's a completely over the top performance, and being reprimanded and almost looking like he was kind of ashamed that he had relapsed. Um, but then he just goes into sadistic mode, like that. It's like
Yeah,
immediate.
yeah. Well, once the dam is breached, I think that everybody kind of loses it and
Yeah.
reverts back, and that's where all the fun comes in. What did you think about the violence in the Gore in this movie? It's something that we discussed a lot in other movies based on whether or not we think it's sort of cringeworthy or whether or not it's maybe more misogynistic than hopeful or whatever. In this movie, it felt actually not. It felt kind of reserved to me. It didn't really feel like it was over the top.
I was gonna say, I mean, it's pretty bloody, but for some reason, it doesn't kind of gross you out in a way that maybe Terrifier did, and it also, this movie is I think, and this is not a criticism, but I don't think this movie's scary at all. I think it's kind of campy enough. Terrifier, I thought was scary, and there aren't long drawn out torture scenes in Monster Party.
Right.
That's maybe the difference. But I don't know. What did you think?
I feel like there was a lot that we didn't actually end up seeing in terms of the violence and the horror. I mean, you know, there are shots where people are getting disemboweled and you're not actually seeing it. For instance,
Yeah,
when Casper's character takes on Patrick, the father figure, he cuts him in half almost, basically, but you don't. It's shot from behind, so you don't really see everything. When the sort of like goonish, gimpish character that they keep in the basement comes out and actually does attack people, you don't actually see what he's doing. It's just sort of implied. So there's a lot of stuff that I think in other films that were more exploitational would have been shown and would have been really kind of gorily handled. In this case, I feel like Hoffman sort of stepped back, and I don't know if it was because he was trying to take it more seriously, or if it was because he was just trying to keep his resources in check and try to make the whole experience more believable because of that. I think in some ways I would have liked to have seen a little bit more graphic sort of stuff, but I'm glad it wasn't like an overreach.
well, I think it was. I think you might. I think you might have just hit it at the end there. I think it might have just been a stylistic choice. Um,
Yeah,
he may have that. There may be, you know, stuff that he cut. Um,
yeah, yeah. He clearly has some tricks up his sleeve. He clearly has a real distinct eye for setting up shots and for sort of putting everything together. So it really could be part of the way that he decided to try to assemble all the different parts that he could. But
okay.
I think going back to what you were saying about whether or not this was scary, this movie actually had a real wry sense of humor to it as well. And
Yeah.
like we were discussing a little bit earlier, this movie has, I think, a lot of satirical elements to it that it makes the movie less about it being a violent gore fest and exploitational, and more about something that's trying to say or maybe make some sort of point. It's got a twist to it, and it does have
Yeah.
it feels like it is trying to go beyond just showing like squirting blood and rolling heads. So, and I give it credit for that. you know, it's for me the way that everything comes together at the end, the sort of the violence that's unleashed at the end makes the whole thing so much more satisfying that it sort of like picks up the slack.
I think that it is very satisfying. The ending is very satisfying. That's the other question I wanted to ask you about is what do you think sequel?
I don't know. They set it up in an interesting way. It could happen.
It definitely could happen.
You know, it'd be fun to kind of see where it goes. I think the ending again was such a like a fist pumping kind of like, yes, this is excellent kind of ending to it that I'm okay if that's the end.
He could do a prequel. He would have to get the actors to come back.
Yeah.
But the adult actors, I think, could make that could be a great movie.
I mean, they hinted at it in the kill room, I guess, that they had in the basement, basically. But I imagine that would have been a much more elaborate sort of set. I think that maybe he wanted that to seem like a bigger deal than it kind of came across. I think in the actual set dressing, it came across as like a little Pottery Barnish, and not necessarily quite as as diabolical as maybe it was supposed to be. But what are you gonna do? That's what you gotta work with. I think in general, it's like I would say that Hoffman has this habit of overpromising on what he can deliver. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. To me, it's like his ambition stretches beyond what his means are at the moment. In the last movie, it was because I think of what his resources were. In this movie, I think it's because his ideas maybe were too big and he couldn't quite figure out how to fit them in yet. And it's interesting because I think that he's a director that has a very distinct style already. So I think that he is a director who wants to make bigger and better serious A-list movies. But at the moment, he still is making B movies. So he has B movie resources. And I think that sometimes it's just a noticeable disconnect between like the quality of what he wants it to be and the quality of what actually is delivered because of that. This movie was still a step, way up from where he was on Drifter, I think. But at the same time, this movie did suffer from these issues. I mean, it suffered from, there being just too much to it. Maybe it suffered from, I think, some lack of resources, and which is good because I mean, if that's the thing that's tying you back, hopefully, eventually, that's not going to be the thing anymore.
Or maybe he's just got this attitude, like, I'd rather have him leave wanting more.
So, Dave, I mean, I always ask this, would we have survived? Would we have survived going to this party? I guess, ostensibly, let me just say, I think that we are the caterers in this situation, not the killers, but...
Definitely the caterers, and we're
definitely dead.
Oh, you think so? We're definitely dead.
I mean... Oh, there's no question. I mean, you think we survive?
The caterers had their advantages, and through misfortune, I guess they lost it. I mean, there was a gun involved at one point that really didn't have to get lost. We could have figured that out. We could have done better.
That's an interesting point. The gun, yes, there were some convenient dropping of weapons.
Yeah, there was. Yeah.
He drops a sword towards the end.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
The one thing you're not going to do is drop the sword.
I don't know. It would have been interesting. I mean, I guess the advantage is that the guests themselves sort of unravel amongst each other as well. So we might have, if we just held out, if we just had stayed put, locked in a door or behind a room or something, we could have come out of this maybe eventually. But
I said I'm still saying no. I don't think we make it.
I feel like your outlook whenever I ask you this is always pretty pessimistic. I don't know.
I don't have a whole lot of confidence in our ability to survive horror sequences.
Of any sorts.
No. But, I like that you're more optimistic. I feel like you're the yin to my yang or vice versa. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll keep you alive. That's the idea.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's nice of you.
Yeah, I do what I can. Okay, so overall, what do you think? Just if you're going to list out some stuff, the good qualities of this movie. Well, if you're going to bam.
Yeah, like I said, I think the pacing, the performances. I just like the whole conceit of the film. It's kind of a cool idea. It felt kind of fresh to me. I think there, definitely were some homages to other films, but I don't think the film is overly derivative. I just think it's a fun movie. I don't think it's necessarily gonna make a top 10, but it may be top 10 most enjoyable films of the year. So yeah, I like it.
When we reach 10 that we review, I think you could probably do your top 10.
that's a good idea. So maybe sometime 2022 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what you're saying, I think like there's a legitimate sense of tension that's ratcheted up in this. I think that worked out very well. I think it is an intriguing concept. I like the basic premise and how it wasn't entirely clear to begin with, and I also like the way that he chose a very interesting setting for it, which was ultimately kind of a really bright, cheery place. I mean, it was a paradise ultimately that he was setting this in. I thought that was a really nice counterpoint to the ideas behind it. I think that he knows how to cut action. I think that he knows how to direct action, and that was satisfying. And again, the ending just really. If it didn't have the ending, I don't know if I really would have liked it as much. I really think the ending put both a final twist on the storyline, but also delivered such a satisfying punch to the characters in general and to the action and stuff like that I was just pretty happy about it.
Yeah, the ending, because I brought up the idea of a sequel. What kind of character is Casper going to be if it's about him? I'm telling you, maybe we should reach out and see if we can get him to let us know if it's in the cards or not.
Yeah. And then if you're going to sum up the bad stuff quickly, anything else you want to talk about? Or
the line where, she says, I forget exactly what she says, but she just kind of brushes off the idea of why she couldn't just walk away. If he could have spent maybe a minute or two fleshing that out, maybe with a flashback, and you know what, maybe that would have been awful too, but I don't know, it just feels like maybe that could have been dealt with a little better, to at least make it more palatable as a mystery. But I'm picking nits. It's really not that big a deal.
Yeah, I mean, again, for me, I think it really just comes down to ambition versus what you can deliver, and the script maybe being a little bit too overly ambitious, and maybe there just being not enough kind of character development fleshed out throughout the storyline. But otherwise, yeah. I mean, so what's your verdict overall?
I definitely recommend it. I had a lot of fun with it, and it's definitely the best. Definitely better than Puka. I'll tell you that right now.
Okay, I'm also gonna say watch this, and that means that we both give a thumbs up to Hoffman on this, which I feel like it's a nice change from the last time. Stepping back for a second, do you have a ranking in mind?
I would say I'll still say Apostle number 1. I'll go Monster Party 2, and Tag 3, Terrifier 4, Drifter 5, Puka 6.
Interesting.
The two movies, Drifter, I hate to say it. The two movies, there were only two that I really didn't like, and Puka and Drifter. Yeah. But Drifter, at least, we both said that, we wanted to see what came next. And it's funny, I read a little more about Puka, but it's leaving me. But I feel like the director of that film's done some really good movies. I remember being like, oh, wow. Yeah, he did Colossal.
He did Colossal, right.
Which is a great movie.
Yeah.
Sometimes the director makes a movie that, it doesn't click for you, but maybe the next one really will. So
have you watched anything else? I know we talked about this a little bit, but yeah.
Holidays kind of got the better of me. I'll try and do better next time, though.
I'm so surprised and ashamed, but that's okay.
What about you?
Nope, but I don't feel like I have any real expectations to live up to on this. I mean, you're the movie guy. I just sort of show up, so,
I know. I really I fell down on the job.
Hopefully drunk, because that's New Year's.
Over the last couple of weeks, I'm sure there was some drinking involved at some point.
Oh, yeah, and heavily. That's what family is for.
Yeah, I think you're...
Okay, any final thoughts?
Yeah, go watch Monster Party.
Nice plug. I guess that about does it. Welcome to 2019, everybody. Thanks for watching the show. A special shout out to Jenna, our newest fan. Glad to hear that you like it. And keep watching. Subscribe to us. Check us out on Twitter. You can even follow us on Facebook if you really want to. But, I mean, Facebook is, it's ridiculous. Really shouldn't. You should really just follow us on Twitter and follow us on YouTube. And
yeah, Facebook's kind of a scourge on society. Yeah, I don't condone, but we do have a Facebook page, so go ahead and follow that.
I mean, you can follow that. Our Twitter page really has more stuff going on, even though it hasn't lately, but it will again at some point. So, yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you again soon. Enjoy the rest of your 2019. If we don't see you to 2020, no, I'm going to cut all that. That doesn't make any freaking sense. I have to come up with some sort of ending. This is just like every time it's middling, and I'm like, I always forget until I have to edit the show, and then I'm like, oh shit, we never say anything we have to say at the end.
That should be the ending.
That could be the ending right there, yeah.
One thing I have to say is that I am so impressed with myself that I, at no point during this show, called it Murder Party, which is a different movie.
You really wanted to, right?
I do it all the time, man.
Have you seen Murder Party?
I have not seen Murder, and I really want to, because it's